All right,
Okay.
we're live. Welcome to the pit. Live, the live, clean, fight dirty, live clean, and fight dirty show. Weekly live every week at 4:30 Wednesday Pacific Standard Time. Want to thank everyone for joining us. Today's a good one, folks. We're going to be talking about Southpaw versus Orthodox or both, right? Some people feel that you should stick to one stance. Some people should feel should do both. If you look at fighters like Israel Adesanya, he does both. In MMA, some guys are going towards the direction of doing both. But if you look at traditionally, a lot of boxers would never do that. Maybe some would, but the majority don't. But what do the experts have to say? That's why we're going to turn to our expert, our residential expert, and host of the Live Clean and Fight Dirty show, John Hackelman. John Hackelman, thank you
Hey,
for gracing us with your presence and having us here for this live conversation. Yo, if you're watching this and you have questions that have nothing to do with our topic, at the end of our show, at the last 5 minutes, you can bring it up now. And if it has to do with our topic, you can ask an expert right here, right now. You can ask him. He's right there for you. So please ask. But before we do, I know we're going to go to the topic. Your Instagram got shut down, and people do like following that, man. What'd you do, bro? Who'd you piss
I
off?
don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I was having a little debate with some people. I don't think it got ugly, but then I had some stuff I took off of UFC, but it was just pictures. They don't usually do that over pictures, So I'm not sure what it was. It just said I'm out, and if I want to find out, it gave me all these instructions. If I want to find out why I'm kicked off or how I can protest it or whatever but I can't sign back. It won't let me sign on. I'm like off. I'm like completely out. It won't even let me sign in. It won't let me go through the regular um, sign in process. And when I say password lost, it like brings me up to this thing where you have to have an 8-digit something code and I don't know how to find it, and I don't have one. Anyway, it's a mess. If anybody out there knows anything about that, please send me a message, email john@thepit.tv, and I'd appreciate it. But anyway, forget that. Let's talk about the Southpaw regular
Southpaw versus Orthodox. So yeah, but most of these want to let you know that if you do follow his Instagram, you can still find him here. He's still on Facebook, all right, and we're right here on YouTube. We are on YouTube. So if you for now, if you have any questions right now, the live show is a really good option for you. So Orthodox versus Southpaw. First of all, which is your favorite stance?
I think I think it's a simple answer and kind of a no-brainer, but a lot of people turn into a brainer. It's kind of like if you're a pitcher. What side is better if you're a pitcher? Okay. Now, some people say it's the opposing, if the other guy's opposite from you. Some people think southpaw batters are more difficult, lefty batters. Some people think lefty southpaw opponents fighting are better. Here's the facts are there are less southpaws because most people are right hand dominant, and there's not a real percentage. It's like something like 20% or 25% just overall. But when you talk about fighting, that's a whole different genre. So a lot of people like to switch up early because they think they get an advantage. I don't think they do at all, but some people think they do. So they're southpaw, but their dominant hand when they write or shave, right, is their right hand, but they keep that forward. So that's kind of not a true southpaw, but I don't think there's this advantage or not. I think the only advantage for southpaw or regular is I think if you're a southpaw, it's better to get a knockout liver kick because of the way the anatomically you set up. And I think if you're a orthodox, you have a better left hook to the liver. So there's that. I think those are the only things, and it cancels each other out. So other than that, there is no And you have a better spinning back kick if you're orthodox, because your right leg should be doing the one doing the kicking. Because if you turn around, right, that's what attacks the liver most, is your right leg when you're doing a spinning back kick. So I don't know which is better. There's pros and cons to both. What I do think is not good is people that switch back and forth and back and forth. And I don't think they're ever as good as they would be. I mean, because you can think of a pitcher. How many pitchers are regular, but then they're coming up against the Southpaw batter, so they switch up and they do orthodox. It doesn't happen. What if you're a quarterback? Are you gonna, like, depending on the play, are you gonna switch hands? No, because most people, it takes them their whole life as that in that sport to get good at one side. Very few people are so good as at one side. I don't think anybody really is that great if they switch up all the time, because it takes you too long to perfect one side, much less try to do both. And in most cases, it doesn't really mess up your opponent if you're switching back and forth, or confuse your opponent as much as it does the person switching, because they're the ones that gotta, okay, I gotta adapt now. Okay, and then they switch. Oh, adapt here now. Where the other guy could just be bombing the techniques either way. A left hook's gonna land on either. And so I think you should stick to whichever one you want, and I don't think it matters which one. But I think that you're not going to be as good as you could be in a combat sport if you always switch back and forth. So here's the exception. Here's the exception: is if you're someone like Steve Wonderboy Thompson, you've been doing this since you're 4 years old in your dad's dojo. So you've been training probably 10 hours a day, every day of the week. So you have more time to practice both than most people ever have to practice just one. But just like, that's why they're the only guys there that do kata that are in MMA, right? Machida and Stephen Wonderboy, because they grew up in a dojo spending 8 hours a day training, 10 hours a day. But the normal person that's just trying to get as good as he can, he doesn't have enough time in the day to practice both sides and be just as good as the person that just practices one side. Because being half good at both is not nearly as effective as being really good at just one thing.
Well, we have some comments, and some of the comments relate to what I'm about to say. So, like, when I started training, before I started training, I read Bruce Lee's book, The Tao of Jeet Kune Do, and in there, Bruce Lee was a really big fan of being southpaw, even if you weren't left-handed. He had this whole theory about having the strong hand in front. And so I decided to do southpaw. And later, when I ended up getting into my first class, it was years later. So I ended up in a fight club and training with people, but I didn't end up in a formal class till I was much older. So I started doing Southpaw at the age of 12, didn't end up in my first formal class till I was 18. And in the formal class, the first thing I encountered, I got good at Southpaw. I was already scrapping, and we were already sparring, doing we were pretty much doing MMA. We were doing grappling, takedowns. But when I got my first formal class, everything was coming at me in Orthodox. All the techniques, everything was coming at me in Orthodox. And I immediately said, hey, but I'm Southpaw. What am I supposed to do? And my instructor told me something very similar to your instructor. You shut the fuck up and you do it. and you figure it out later. So it was a big challenge trying to get across that loop. So that being said, we're going to turn to our comments real quick because some guy mentioned this. Zen says hello. Hello, Zen. Will says, whatever works. Zen says you should look up Israel Madrimov. Will says, what's my style? No style. That's a Bruce Lee quote. Zen says, Crawford. Okay. All right. Crawford. And then Will says, what's the greatest technique? To have no technique. Be like water. Again, a Bruce Lee quote. What's your style? The art of fighting without fighting. Another Bruce Lee quote. What if you need to switch up to set up shots or confuse your opponent? We're going to take a pause right there. Here's a question.
And I already said that. I already answered that one.
Yep. And then Mike Tyson could knock you out with either hand. Arguably, Mike Tyson can knock a lot of people out. Terry says, left hook. Yes. Will says, kata are just forms. It doesn't mean it's effective in a real fight. Mac Trey says, do I have to spar for the street? Spar Golden Gloves champions, but I don't want to risk getting brain damage. I'm a striker and a grappler. I love martial arts and want to be an animal for the street. Do you want to answer that now or later?
Was that one question?
That was one question. Do I have to spar for the street? And the context is he sparred Golden Glove champions, but he doesn't want to risk any brain damage. He's a striker and a grappler, and he loves martial arts, but he wants to be an animal for the street with DA. Do I have to spar for the street is the question that he has. Do you want to?
No, you don't. And here's the quick one for the other side. If you're a southpaw or regular, if you want to set up like a really good liver punch, you'd probably want to go from southpaw to regular and develop that if you want to. And if you're regular or orthodox and you want to get a liver kick, it's good to switch southpaw and then throw the liver kick. So there are times when you want to switch to set up things, but I'm talking about people that take their time going both ways. Like if someone's kicking your front leg, that's where this came from. Was last week's UFC. Someone's getting the shit kicked out of their front leg. So the commentator said, why don't they switch to southpaw? That's what you should do. And everybody should learn how to do that. It's like, how about checking the leg kick and not having to switch? That would be a better idea because, switching when you're injured, at a necessity isn't necessarily a good thing. And to practice and be deficit as a striker by going both sides, just so you can, protect your injured leg, I say stay one way and learn a leg check instead. Bang.
Now, more Bruce Lee quotes. Bruce Lee used to love using his lead hand. Another person jumped in and said, be water, my friend. Yeah, there it is.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing about keeping your power hand in front. You're not, this is your strong hand, right? And that's it, not necessarily your power hand, but it's your stronger hand, and you have more dexterity with your right hand. And nobody's asking you to start drawing with your left, or writing with your left, or shaving with your left, right? You can do all those things that take fine motor skills with your dominant hand, which you should do, right? You're gonna wipe your butt with your right and masturbate with your right too. So that's that. But when you're fighting, that front hand swings. You can get your front hand just as powerful as your rear hand because doesn't have to do with dexterity and strength. It has to do with whipping power. So some could say the power is coming from your right side because that's the side you're pulling your hip, and you don't have to kick. You're not trying to get stronger in the front hand. You're just trying to knock people out. Okay, you can still have a dominant side, but fight with your non-dominant side in front. You shouldn't have your power or strength hand in front or back. It doesn't matter. So that's kind of a weak way to say you should always fight with your strong hand front. Why? No, you shouldn't. Because the jab is more. Look at people's jabs. I mean, it's you can develop your left side and your right side and just go from there. And trying to switch to both means you're going to be, if you try to be good at both, you're going to be good at neither really, because you're going to be half and half where you could be a lot better just with one hand forward. And why do you want to switch anyway? What is the main reason for switching? Like I said, if it's because you keep getting leg kicked with your front leg, fucking learn how to leg check. Don't have to switch, because then what are you going to do when the other leg hurts? Switch back, then switch back. I mean, that's just a bad strategy. That just means you're getting the shit kicked. That's desperation. So you should learn a leg check and find out which is your style, what you want to keep, and practice that. then once in a while you want to switch out to make an attack. Maybe you want to take down with your front hand, with your right side forward, or throw a liver kick with your right side forward. Then that's great. But kind of confusing yourself, going back and forth and back and forth, it's not a good strategy at all. I think you're going to be half as good a fighter because you're going to be that much better with one side dominant. Bing. What we got?
So yeah, oh yeah, okay. So Zen says I was talking about boxers, Israel Madrimov and Terence Crawford. They both switched stances. Oh, okay. So earlier I was saying I don't think it's as common in boxing as it is in MMA. And I guess there's some boxers that do that. Now,
yeah, so if you take 100 of the world's best boxers of all time and tell me how many of them fight equally well on both sides, what percentage do you think it would be? I bet you it would be like maybe 2% or 3%. It's not going to be a very high number because I've been following boxing, since the 70s, and I don't remember too many that switched back and forth well. I know there's some that did, but not very many did it well. So anyway.
yeah, I mean, so like I said, and now when I think about this, I picked being a southpaw partially because of the book, and also I skateboard and I surf, and I've always skated and surfed and snowboarded with my right foot forward. It just felt
I'm goofy too.
It
I've been goofy my whole life.
Yeah, I've been goofy my whole life. So like
I don't know how that happened, but
same here. I don't get it. And so like I gravitated when I started to southpaw, and then when I met my first formal instructor, he made me do both. But he made me he tried to get me to go orthodox, but what would happen is I practice whatever we're practicing, I'd practice orthodox, and the second I was sent off to go work it, I'd go back to southpaw and get all my drills in southpaw. And then they were always trying to get me to do both. And then later when I got into kickboxing, my kickboxing coach finally said, stop that shit, pick a side, stick to it. And he said the same reason for leg kicks. He said, just check your leg kicks, pick a side and stick to it. It's going to be easier for you than switching all the time. So I decided to stick to southpaw. And of course, when I'm teaching, I got to go back to orthodox. The teaching just adds a whole new wrench to the entire thing. But that's a whole other show we can do on how to teach a southpaw and orthodox, because that really does throw a wrench in your angles and how you're showing stuff to people. Will asks,
and it's a different strategy. If my guy's the regular or orthodox and he's fighting a southpaw, there's a whole strategy that if that same fighter with the same skills, but he was a regular fighter, everything would be different. So the whole strategy changes, and especially the footwork and the angles of the punches. Like we have punches named after our opponents, and I'm not going to name them right now, and some of them are southpaw, some are regular, and some of my kicks, like I'll give you one. I had a Babalu kick when Chuck fought Babalu, and it was perfect, and it wouldn't have worked if Babalu came at him southpaw. So, and then we have a couple other ones, and it only worked because the guy was southpaw. So, I mean, it does change your strategy a lot when you're fighting, someone that's either, and if he's both equally, then that changes the strategy too, because when he does switch, everything switches. Then when he's back, but so we're changing up, but a lot of times it's confusing the guy more than it's confusing you, because as soon as that right leg comes up, he's forward, boom, my right leg's gonna go right to his head. And anyway, so there's strategies for both, but I feel like it's more confusing to the switcher than it is to the switchee.
So some more comments. Timothy Bruce on Facebook says, I teach for self-defense and I've always leaned towards somebody to the limited time approach. They don't only have so much time in the gym, so I want them to get really good on whichever side is natural for them, whatever dominant side is natural for the student. Will says, do whatever works for you. If an instructor tries to tell you to do something that feels uncomfortable, then he's a cult leader. And I mean, yeah, that's easy to say, but once you're in the actual, go ahead and tell that to your instructor. When you're actually in class, it's easier just to, you were saying Bruce Lee quotes earlier, right? Empty your cup. It's something I always do when I'm traveling. I'll go to different gyms, different studios. I'll go to a karate school, even, or even a kung fu school. I'll visit places, jujitsu places. And when I walk in the door, I empty my cup and I keep my opinions to myself at that time. Now, do I express it later? Yeah. But at that time, I tend to just see what they're doing and just go from there. And let's say more Bruce Lee quotes. If it works, keep it. If it doesn't, get rid of it. Yeah, leave, right? So I have, yeah, right? So like I know. So again, that's how my approach is when I'm in those situations. I take it for what it is. And who knows? Sometimes I've been surprised. I'm like, sometimes I'm sitting there scratching my head about something someone's showing, but then later, while doing the drill, it makes sense. So I'm not exactly the smartest tool in the shed either. So, well, in our comments, what else? Okay, wow, they've calmed down. I think that's it. They have nothing else to say. You have nothing else to say, guys? Girls? Anyone?
Yeah. Well, somebody try to get me back on Instagram, please.
Yes.
That's a pain in the butt. It's irritating. It's so irritating. But you know what it told me? I'm gonna start going on TikTok more.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm gonna start and I'm already on Facebook a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm also gonna do X or Twitter more. So between Twitter,
Threads. Threads. I don't know. I've heard of this.
I don't know what that is.
I don't know what it is either. I keep now I showed you how technologically inadequate I am. I keep seeing this thing called Threads and comments on.
Yeah,
no. I don't want anything to do with it.
But it looked like something. It says something about thread on my little note that kicked me off, like something thread. Like
they kicked you off. You got kicked out of there too already.
No, I got kicked out of Instagram.
Oh, Instagram. Okay.
But it said something about thread. I don't know what it meant, but
yeah, no,
anyway,
Facebook and Instagram, I think they own another thing called Threads. My question though is, did they give you a time frame on the ban, or was it a permanent ban?
They're saying basically it's permanent unless I can basically talk them out of it somehow, or if they let me back in. I don't know.
Because normally I've been banned a few times, and normally there's a time frame. It'll say you've been banned for this post for 30 days or 15 days. I think
this one said 90 days unless it said, and something else said 180 days. So I was like, I don't know. I'm just
so they just keep adding more to your sentence.
But to be honest, I'm gonna start pushing TikTok more.
And then more questions are coming in. Do you guys still spar? Asks Mac Trey. Are you asking like me personally spar, or are you asking like this is? I'm gonna assume us personally. And if you mean the classes, please clarify that now. I'm gonna go with your no, Angelo. What's your training schedule? Oh Jesus. Okay. So us personally, do we still spar? And then he said, Angelo, my training schedule. I still spar. I do. I'm 42, and yeah, sometimes I regret going in there with some of the younger guys, but yeah, I still go in there and I gotta do it. I don't have all the resources that John has. I don't have a lot of coaches. It's just me and maybe one other guy that comes in on Tuesday. So yesterday I had my kickboxers come in, and they have a fight coming up next in 2 weeks. One of them's a Kyokushin guy, and he's just got a huge size difference. These guys, these two are training on a weird time schedule, and they're coming in after work, and they're not coming in. They can't make it to class, and I'm giving them drills to do, but their size difference is really big. One guy is 58 kilograms, which is what? He's a lightweight. One guy's a lightweight, and one guy's a middleweight, and he's tall. So there's a huge size difference between these two guys, and I'm trying to figure out. He looks. The shorter guy has more fighting experience. The taller guy has never done kickboxing. And I was trying to figure out what's up with he was doing a great job. And I wanted to make sure that he wasn't doing a great job because of a size difference. And I'm a little heavier, so I had to step in and spar him, which I personally did not want to do because I already trained that morning. But yeah, he did a good job. He had his hands a little low against the other guy, and he brought his hands up with me. He had a big problem, like a lot of Kyokushin guys do, with if I aggressively came in with hooks, he wouldn't block them very well, and he'd turn around and run away. So we had to dial that out. But eventually we dialed it out, and he caught me with a. I kept telling him, he kept trying to punch me in the chest because the Kyokushin guy, right? And I said, you got to punch me in the face. You got to punch me in the face, and he finally listened to me. He punched me in the face. I told him to. So yeah. So
This okay. So I'm sure this Kokishin guy hit hard off. But can you imagine when because I would yell at Chuck when we were sparring, like, keep your hands up, you gotta block my punches. He couldn't block my punches in the beginning. And I'm trying. I was like, come on, you gotta hit back, I could block all his punches until I couldn't. Can you imagine when that switched and then he started being able to kick my butt? So I have somebody like Chuck, and we're sparring. We sparred 100%. It was never like drilling. It was sparring as hard as we could. And the day I remember walking out of the ring thinking, oh, I just fucked myself. This is fucking gonna turn ugly. Because I was the only trainer. This is back in the 90s, you know? And then boom, he's like, it's not fun anymore. He's blocking all my stuff now, and he's landing all his. There's no fun anymore. I wish I held something back and didn't teach him, but there was nothing. I had nothing. It was done. And then all of a sudden Glover comes in, and I'm still pretty good. I'm still fighting then. Was I still fighting? I think I just retired then. But I got, Glover was, he was kind of new. So I could go with Glover until I couldn't. And my guys, Glover, Chuck, guys like that, once they get the edge and I have to spar with them, it's a whole different level of fuck. You know what I mean? So I remember going home and I was like, I told all my buddies, it's like, fuck, I just fucked up, man. I should have kept some secrets, man. Now I just got the shit kicked out of me. I have a feeling it's gonna always be like this from now on.
yeah.
And it was.
You did a good, like I said, I did a good job as a coach.
Yeah,
as a coach.
We do a good job at a coach when our students can kick the shit out of us, right?
Yeah.
But we wish we didn't.
Yep. No, I immediately, the second he got, I kept telling him, gotta use your jab. And the second he landed that jab, and he's bigger than me, I was like, yeah, good job. Good job. So to answer your question, Mactor, you wanted to know my personal training schedule. I train 6 days a week still. I do martial arts training every morning, followed by triathlon training. And I also do weight training 6 days a week with 1 day off. And sometimes my day off gets a wrench thrown into it because my daughter likes doing sports too, like snowboarding and stuff. So I'll end up doing other stuff too. So that's my training schedule, if you were curious about that. Let's see. Anything else? Sparring creates ego battles, so I don't spar. Oh yeah, well, yeah, that's one way to deal with it.
Yeah, but you could say if that's the case, if you have such bad partners, then that means you can't spar, you can't wrestle, you can't do jujitsu, because if ego is such a big deal, you're going to get hurt in any of those. I mean, if you can't grapple or you can't do jujitsu because if ego is that big of a problem, you're going to be always injured. And wrestling, you're always going to be injured. So the only thing that you can do safely, if you're really saying ego is the problem, is conditioning, like CrossFit or some kind of like race or rowing race or who can lift more weights or something. Then you're not going to get hurt, and the winner will win. But if there's an ego problem you have in your gym with sparring, then that takes away all of the combatives, the wrestling, the jiu-jitsu, and the striking, and it only leaves the conditioning. Speaking of this, I got a topic which we're going to go over. It's a great topic. Check it out. Effective striking is a combination of two opposites, and you have to meet somewhere, or you're not going to be good at striking at all. And the two opposites are power and telegraphing. Okay, so Boom, you got the most power in the world and you got the most telegraphing in the world. You're going to have the hardest punches, but none will land because you're telegraphing too much, right? Now you start telegraphing a little less, but if you're throwing an overhand right, you're always going to telegraph. You telegraph a little less, you're going to have still a lot of power, but a little less power. So you're going to be about, this effective. So then you want to telegraph a little less. You're going to hit even not as even less powerful. So basically, at the end of that, you're going to be you don't telegraph at all or barely at all, but you have barely any power. That's the jab. So that's where the jab is, just right there. Boom. You're not going to see it coming, right? The overhand right is the other extreme. That's the haymaker. That's the most powerful strike you can throw, but it's not the most effective because you have to telegraph it. So it shows you're going to throw it. You can get out of the way easier. The jab has the less telegraphing, but the least power. Okay. Now the left hook is, to me, the sweet spot because you barely telegraph at all, but you still have a lot of power. So you telegraph less, but you still have enough power. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one, guys. So we're gonna do this as a
different
podcast.
show.
Not next week, the week after.
Yeah, I'll say next week.
How can you meet in the middle to be the most effective striker? You have to have the telegraphing to a minimum and the power to a maximum.
So stay tuned. We're already throwing it out. A cliffhanger ending. What is effective striking, power versus telegraphing? So if any of you are about to ask that question, we're gonna stay out of that question because we're gonna cover that for the full show next week. So Will, keep that in mind. I'm not gonna mention that comment you just made because I want you to bring that back, please, about striking. Rolo, hello Rolo, thanks for joining us, brother. I'm right-handed and got used to standing southpaw because of all the years of wrestling. Should I learn to stand orthodox?
Have you started your official striking training yet? If you have, and you've been doing it a while, stick with what you are and what you're doing. But if you haven't started yet, you should start. If you're right-handed, you should probably just go hit the bag and see which feels better and stick with that.
Yeah, and don't Rolo's like force myself. You shouldn't force yourself, man. If you feel like you're forcing yourself into a stance, then most likely you shouldn't do that because your body is telling you something else. Brian says right-handed southpaw. Yeah, there it is. Blessings, guys. Hey, thanks, brother. We really appreciate it. And thanks again for your questions, man. Next week we're gonna cover that striking. One thing he did say was after that, I was talking about sparring striking. Yeah, I understand. Sparring striking is I really like thanks to John, I don't go 100% all the time. That sucked. He's the one who introduced me to the idea that, hey, it's okay to go 10% to the head and then go a little harder in the body.
I told you guys about Chuck's black belt test. That was one of the worst days of my life because I had 3 of my toughest guys going for their black belt. One of them was the guy that hit so hard. He's the first guy that beat Glover, number 1. Number 2, I've seen him almost KO a guy while he was mounted. He hit that hard. Then my other guy is just a beast. We call him Tony the Terrible, right? I got my guy Rick Metzler, who's training forever. He's like a 12-0 kickboxer. And then I had Chuck Liddell. I thought I would be the good instructor, and I'm going to teach them all a lesson and test them. So I went with 10 minutes of each of them, full on. I was bleeding so bad after those 40 minutes. Guess what? They weren't. But anyway, whatever. I learned my lesson.
100% of the time asking for CTE. Yep. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us for the Live Clean and Fight Dirty show. Don't let anyone take your lunch money. We're here every week, Wednesdays, 4:30 p.m. You can ask your questions to an expert. John Hackelman here to answer your questions about martial arts. Catch you all next time.